Okay, so this is my video response for the week of November 18th. There was 3 things that I found interesting in the article. The first being when it talks about how Socrates was sent by the gods to remind the men not to concern themselves with their riches or their honor, but with themselves and with their souls. I just found it interesting just because you have like a really big figure like in history that we talk about being wise and looking to their ideals and mindsets, talking about something so basic as like the self and that being like the most important thing. And like while that seems obvious that we should be focusing on the self, we tend to focus on literally everything but the self. So I think that's interesting just when we're talking about self-care and what that actually means. The next thing that I just wanted to address, later on in the article it says self-care in America has always required a certain amount of performance, and how we can't really like say that we are exhibiting self-care if everybody doesn't know, or if society doesn't say like, oh yeah, that is self-care. And I think that kind of goes back to what I was saying about Socrates, because you're not supposed to concern yourself with the collective, more so you're supposed to concern yourself with the individual. And when that happens, it's only then can you actually like exhibit any type of change towards the collective. So I agree with the article when it talks about that, just because self-care is something more than like a face mask or something. It's much deeper than that, and it's much deeper than what like society can label as like a superficial self-care, quote unquote self-care day. And then the third thing that I found extremely interesting, and not only interesting, I've noticed myself doing this and just people I know in general doing this, but so I'll just read it and then I'll reiterate it. So it says the risk of promoting individual self-care as a solution to existential anxiety or oppression is that victims will become isolated in a futile struggle to solve their own problems rather than to collectively change the systems causing them harm. And I think this is super, super important. And I also understand why somebody would like find comfort in just doing that, like self-care and fixing the individual. I know I just went off on like how you should fix the individual and stuff, but fixing the individual doesn't like really target or address anything that goes on with the collective, because at the end of the day, that's what affects people in general. Like not necessarily the collective, but the institutions surrounding the collective and the individual. But I understand why people would do that, like hide behind quote unquote like a self-care day, because that just makes it simple, and that makes things like you understand things in a simpler way. That way you don't actually have to deal with things like it said with like existential anxiety and oppression. That way it's easier to understand and I guess cope with and live with the bad things in life, because we give ourselves a quote unquote self-care day. But yeah, I mean I tend to really agree with the article this week. And yeah, that's pretty much all of the interesting things that stuck out to me, because those things kind of hit home a little more versus the rest of the article. But I agreed with the majority of the article this week.